Fans all across the globe were astonished by only one snapshot from 1956. Once 300 pounds of comedic brilliance, Oliver Hardy now appeared as a mere specter. No one noticed that he had dropped almost 100 pounds. No one understood just how ill he was. The studio continued to promote his flicks while keeping the secret. A man battling for his life lurked under that iconic mustache and tangled ties. The Hollywood studio's attempts to conceal the adored star's last days are ultimately exposed by this rare photo. In a little village in Georgia, Oliver Hardy came into this world on January 18, 1892. Although he had made it through one of the most brutal Civil War battles unscathed, Oliver's father died of a heart attack a mere 11 months after the boy was born. He was someone Oliver never got to know. His mother was already taking care of their children from a prior marriage when she was left to run boarding houses across Georgia. Oliver watched his mom struggle to make ends meet as they were always on the road. His insecurity from a young age stayed with him. Oliver was exceptional from a young age. He began touring around the South as a boy soprano when he was only 8 years old. He was musically gifted. Oliver wasn't the kind to sit quietly in a classroom, so his mother sent him to Atlanta to train with a prominent voice coach. He forewent instruction in favor of performing in theaters for $3.50 per week, a respectable sum in those days. To join a touring performance, he even skipped school. School was never his place since he was born with an innate and unquenchable thirst for the spotlight. After a stint at a military academy for discipline, he was transferred to a mountain college in Georgia, where he shown little interest in his studies. He made the most of his opportunities to play in local theater. He decided to attend the University of Georgia to become a lawyer when he was 20 years old, although it was more for football than any love of literature on his part. In all his years of athletic participation, he failed to ever crack open a textbook. Nonetheless, he carried the self-assurance he acquired on that field with him forever. In 1910, Oliver had worked his way up to managing the projector and cleaning for a small-town theater. He was stoked by all those movie hours. He began to think he could outdo the actors on screen. Consequently, he relocated to Jacksonville, Florida in 1913. This city was essentially the Southern Hollywood at the time, with more than 30 studios. He was a day worker at a film studio and a nightclub singer known as the Ton O'Jolly, a reference to his towering 300-pound bulk. Meline Solosian, a musician he met, had 7 times his salary. Despite his mother's disapproval, they were married that very year. Oliver first appeared on screen in 1914 in a short film titled Outwitting Dad, in which he was given the credit of O.N. Hardy was cast as the heavy, the villain, due to his size, 6'1", and approximately 300 lb. 50 short films had already been released by 1915, with him frequently starring as the villain who pursues the lanky hero. However, his early slapstick parts taught him the ins and outs of physical comedy, including how to tumble and make funny faces. Even more surprisingly, he was hired to mimic the performance of another actor, this one playing Charlie Chaplin's sidekick. For a while, it covered expenses, even if it was ridiculous. Oliver helmed 11 pictures between 1916 and 1917, in which he also appeared as an actor. During his brief stint as a director, he honed his comedic timing, audience reading skills, and joke construction. The studio's proprietors were taking from the payroll, which he revealed as corruption. Not long later, the business went down, but he kept working. He just found a new studio. The marriage of Oliver and Meline began on a positive note. They shared venues, even had pets, a monkey and a dog. However, all changed in 1917 when they relocated to Los Angeles. Both his professional life and his pursuit of other women flourished. Meline had already taken him to court in 1919, seeking $30 weekly as maintenance. Payments were frequently not received from him. She went to see her sick father. Hardy told her they would make things right, but then he telegraphed her to say he wouldn't accept her back. And that was that. World War I recruiters made fun of Hardy because of his little stature when he attempted to join the service. Yet, he persisted in his labor. Something happened on film in 1921 that nobody noticed but would go down in history books. The Lucky Dog, a short, silent comedy, premiered on December 1st. Stan Laurel played a young guy who was homeless and on the run when he befriended a stray dog in the film. Oliver Hardy makes an appearance as an awkward thief in the same picture. He plots a heist and then joins up with Laurel's envious lover to detonate explosives. However, the plot is foiled when the little dog comes to his rescue. Laurel and Hardy made their cinematic debut in this short, which at first glance sounds like any other vintage comedy. Little did anybody know that they were destined to become one of the most legendary comedic duos in history. Even so, they weren't even pals back then. They were only two males performing separate roles in the same movie. Hardy was menacing and rugged, while Laurel was untamed and brimming with vitality. Realizing how great of a team they might be would take almost 7 more years. Even though that single short waited 2 years before being released, Hardy was already making a reputation for himself. He appeared in 40 silent films for Vitagraph Studios from 1918 to 1923, with the majority of his roles being villains. Larry Simone, a comic who enjoyed crazy antics, explosives, and disorder, was his companion at the time. They made lavish, action-packed movies that often ended in disaster. It was common for Hardy to fake a beard and heavy eyebrows so he could seem meaner. His professional life was booming, but his home life was in shambles. Hardy wed Myrtle Reeves in November 1921, only 1 week after he filed for a divorce from his first wife. Despite the fact that she was an actress, they were completely unrelated. While he put in long hours at the office and spent his leisure time gambling, she remained at home. Her heavy drinking began around 1926. Despite Hardy's best efforts to rehabilitate her by admitting her to a sanitarium for treatment, she continued to run away and drink. She once went missing for 6 weeks while carrying $35,000 in cash. According to Hardy, he looked all around for her. They went through several breaks-ups and reconciliations, perhaps as many as 10 times, but they didn't formally divorce until 1937. Decades of disorder. In any case, Hardy's career continued to progress. He portrayed the role of Tin Man in Larry Semon's 1925 silent adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. Black and white, slapstick-heavy, and starring Simone's real-life fiancée, this wasn't the musical version that audiences know and love today. When they arrived in Oz, Hardy changed from a farmhand into the Tin Man. Even the most cynical critic would have to admit that it was a hit with one publication. In hindsight, the film revealed something significant: the refinement of Hardy's timing, movement, and facial emotions. He was starting to take on more of a villainous role. Along with another comic named Bobby Ray, he collaborated on 4 comedic shorts that year. 2 of them had them playing roles such as sanitarium wallpaper hangers and disastrous hotel bellhops. The fact that these pictures looked so much like Laurel and Hardy, minus Laurel, is what really set them apart. Ray portrayed the bumbling sidekick to Hardy's cunning and authoritative character. Even though the parts were known, something seemed odd. Some critics felt that Ray lacked charisma, humor, and chemistry. "I was the wise guy, just like with Laurel," Hardy later said. The recipe was nearly complete. All it required was the correct man to stand by his side. And that was only with Laurel that I am also the fall guy. Before his name was ever known to the general public, Oliver Hardy had already appeared in over 250 pictures. Working at Hal Roach Studios by 1924, he had a string of noteworthy but minor parts in short comedies. Not quite a star just yet, but he was noticeable. Also arriving at the studio at the same time was Stan Laurel, another comedian. They weren't brought on as a team, they were merely available simultaneously. However, destiny operates in an enigmatic manner. In one of the short films made in 1926, Stan was asked to replace Hardy after he burnt his arm preparing leg of lamb. Something clicked the second they were on screen in each other's company. It was organic, unplanned, and effortless. The synergy was immediate, and people started laughing more. The studio decided to turn them into a legitimate squad in 1927. Putting Pants on Philip was their official debut feature film together. Stan was a renegade Scot in a kilt, and Hardy was the strict uncle attempting to get him to wear pants. This was a far cry from the Laurel and Hardy of today. Impressive, audacious, and well-received. Their chemistry as the naive hero and the irritated straight guy was on full display. The difference was so striking that the audience went absolutely wild. They created what is today thought of as the largest pie battle in cinema history in the 1927 movie Battle of the Century. Pies were flung throughout the neighborhood after a boxing fight. Stan has a toothache and ends up with laughing gas in the 1928 film Leave 'Em Laughing. After that, it's all mayhem, car wrecks, police, and laughter. No one else was doing physical humor on that level, and they weren't your average slapstick shorts. Around the same period, Hardy began to form the persona that would later define him. He was the haughty man who struggled to maintain his dignity, but ultimately felt ashamed. Not only the towering figure who stumbled. When he felt ashamed, he would fiddle with his tie and look directly into the camera as if to say, "Can you believe this?" This became his characteristic motion. It was brilliantly simple. It seemed as if he were speaking directly to the crowd. Sound was the next major development. Despite the widespread demise of silent cinema stars brought about by talkies in 1929, Hardy managed to endure. Unaccustomed as We Are was his first feature-picture collaboration with Stan, and the title itself was a pun on their eventual dialogue. Born and raised in Georgia, Hardy's southern drawl was a natural fit for his haughty on-screen persona. Every sentence he spoke was more hilarious because of his slow, clear, and somewhat pompous delivery. Also about that time, the catchphrases began to emerge. Hardy pleaded with the audience in the first sound picture, asking, "Why don't you do something to help me?" That phrase became his default. In a later picture, Another Fine Problem, 1930, he famously said, "Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into." His pauses, looks, and that voice that managed to remain soft even when enraged helped sell the lines. Following that, the certificates were presented. Their 1932 short film, The Music Box, was the first to win an Oscar for Best Live Action Comedy. The entire picture revolves around the simple act of moving a piano up a massive flight of stairs. However, the comedic timing, the difficulty, and the anger were absolutely priceless. During shooting, 7 actual pianos were broken. Though skeptics debated it, time ultimately sided with proponents. In Los Angeles, you may see a plaque commemorating the film's stairs even now. Their popularity had grown to the point that even short flicks weren't cutting it. Their foray into feature films began with Pardon Us, a jail comedy that evolved from a short sketch into a feature film. It took nearly a year, there was a dispute with MGM, and the project had to be re-edited due to negative previews, but they managed to get it done. Even though they didn't understand a word of it, they recorded it in 4 other languages: Italian, Spanish, French, and German, all while reciting the lyrics phonetically. That was the only one being done. The roles were clearly defined behind the scenes. Laurel was the driving force, penning, directing, editing, and fixating on each joke. After a flawless performance, Hardy promptly retired to his house to play golf or prepare food. To him, it was cool. He wasn't being idle when Stan once told him, "I have plenty of time to play golf." Rather, he was allowing Stan to focus on his strengths, and Stan delivered brilliant performances that gave life to his ideas. 40 shorts and 5 features were produced by them from 1929 to 1935. Hardy was the rock who remained standing when the world around him crumbled during that glorious run. Sons of the Desert, which was released in 1933, is often considered to be the finest picture by Laurel and Hardy. It was unrelated to international conflicts and did not occur in a desert. Rather, it centered on 2 spouses attempting to secretly leave their wives behind in order to attend a lodge conference. The whole team, including the director, had to reshoot parts many times because they couldn't contain their laughter during filming. A memorable event occurred when Mae Bush, laughing uncontrollably, knocked a vase over Hardy's head. The picture was popular even though it was released during the Great Depression. It provided much-needed comic relief. Decades after its first broadcast, it was still playing on Turner Classic Movies in 2005. The combination of spot-on timing, astute humor, and daring performances ensured its longevity. Way Out West was released in 1937, 4 years subsequent. Oliver Hardy surprised everyone by singing, and he sang beautifully. Although The Trail of the Lonesome Pine had been released in 1913, it was Hardy's rendition, which featured Stan Laurel's high-pitched counterbalance, that left an impression on viewers due to his baritone voice. The performance had an endearing and humorous quality. Although Hardy had dabbled with music before, this was one of the few occasions when his talents were truly appreciated. It made his admirers appreciate him even more. A man with genuine talent was hiding under all the laughter. However, Hardy was in pain off-screen. His 16-year marriage to Myrtle Reeves ended in divorce that same year, 1937. Beginning in 1921, their marriage was marred by sorrow, as Hardy did all in his power to alleviate Myrtle's alcoholism and sadness. Present-day equivalent to over $800,000, he forked over $40,000 for her therapies. In the vain hope that she would get well, he repeatedly sent her to sanitariums. After a hard day on set, Hardy would often return home to a scene of complete anarchy, according to his friends. Even though he was going through a rough patch, he still managed to wow audiences with some of his best performances. In November, Hardy was both relieved and grieved by the finalization of the divorce. Meanwhile, in Britain, a lovely thing was taking place. Laurel and Hardy were achieving superstar status by the time they were in their 30s and 40s. Their silent films, which now have sound, have only increased their adoration among followers abroad. Their 1932 UK tour began in Southampton, where more than 5,000 fans were waiting at the pier. The concerts sold out in hours. British publications dubbed it Laurel and Hardy Mania. Hardy wowed the media by claiming, "We're just 2 fellows doing our best to make people laugh." And indeed, they succeeded. Despite playing in fewer theaters in the US, Sons of the Desert was a financial success in the UK. As studio negotiations became increasingly challenging, their celebrity allowed them to push back in Hollywood. The Flying Deuces was then recorded in 1939. Its $375,000 budget allowed for its rapid 22-day production. Hardy encountered people on site who would have a far greater impact on his life than the picture itself. The script girl, Virginia Lucille Jones, was 29 years old, whereas Hardy was 47 years old. They hit it off right away, age difference be damned. To buy himself more time with her, he began filming sequences many times. Their Las Vegas wedding took place on March 8, 1940, a few months down the road. Laurel was his right-hand guy. Though this was Hardy's 3rd marriage, It was to his first love. They remained married until his death in 1957, and Virginia provided him with the security he had been seeking for years. She was the only one, according to his friends, who could keep him grounded, calm, and happy. One of Hardy's secrets, even in those quiet years, was his hunger. Contrary to what he said, he did not eat very much. A 32-ounce steak, lard-fried potatoes, salad, and a full pot of coffee made up his ideal dinner. It was the type of food that made him plump and ideal for his part, opposite the slender Laurel. But being plump came at a price. A heart attack struck Hardy in 1954. He lost more than 150 pounds after doctors ordered him to do so quickly. Cancer was supposedly at blame, although no one ever found proof of it. He appeared like a completely different man after losing weight, which stunned his followers. Most painful, though, was the little sum that he and Laurel earned from their movies. Each film made between $300,000 and $450,000 to produce. But studios like Fox and MGM made millions off of their reputations. But neither Hardy nor Laurel received royalties. They were considered workers, not artists. It wasn't until later on that the studios started letting them rewrite lines and add their own humor. Still, harm had been done. They resumed touring in 1953 and 1954 due to their financial needs in the 1950s. They wouldn't have felt the need to if the studios had paid them a decent wage. It didn't stop them from contributing, though. They were in their 40s when World War II broke out, but that didn't stop them from doing all they could to help the soldiers. For the U.S. Forest Service, they created a short film titled The Tree in a Test Tube in 1942. It was brief, just 5 minutes, but its message was powerful. Help the war effort by saving wood. They also embarked on a cross-country train journey the same year with other celebrities to benefit the soldiers, known as the Hollywood Victory Caravan. In addition to 14 carriages, the train also included dance floors and areas for practicing. They met First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt in Washington, D.C. at the end of the journey. Afterwards, they played to an arena full of people. In the years that followed, they produced 8 feature-length films at a dizzying rate, while also entertaining troops via the USO. Yet, in some way, they accomplished both. Oliver Hardy's latter years were a whirlwind of dwindling fame, dashed hopes, and futile struggles. Laurel and Hardy departed Hal Roach Studios in 1941, the same location that contributed to their legendary status. They were mistaken in thinking that joining with major studios like MGM and Fox would propel them to the next level. They were no longer allowed the leeway to improvise. In contrast to the new studios, where they were confined to rigid screenplays and had to contend with bad writing, Roach allowed them to experiment, be themselves, and fool about. Their enchanted quality started to fade. They discreetly withdrew from filmmaking in 1945 after giving up. A little while, though. After a hiatus in 1946, they embarked on a European tour in 1947. It was 1948 when Stan Laurel became sick. He encouraged Hardy to work alone instead of doing nothing. It was in The Fighting Kentuckian when Hardy and John Wayne joined forces. Hardy had such great connection with Wayne as his awkward sidekick, Willie Payne, that Wayne gave him a regular role as their comedy companion. With Laurel's okay, Hardy went forward, but he was apprehensive about it since he didn't want his followers to think he and Laurel were breaking up. Then Bing Crosby arrived. Crosby cast Hardy in a supporting part in Riding High in 1950. Although it was a little role, it demonstrated that Hardy could still excel in the absence of Laurel. In the same year, they received an opportunity for their final major role in the French-Italian film Atal K. The $1.5 million was decent, but the rest was a total bust. The filming took a year instead of the 12 weeks originally planned. Everywhere you looked, there were language barriers. The director spoke very little English. Laurel and Hardy couldn't speak French. Because Laurel despised the screenplay, he had other writers come in and make changes. A second director, John Barry, had to be discreetly called in when things became so terrible. Hardy, meantime, was ill with the flu, and his heart began to race. Despite his disintegration, the cameras continued to record. The changes started to manifest physically as well. While filming, Hardy gained an additional 25 pounds, bringing his weight up to 330 pounds, exacerbating his cardiac condition. His pals reported he ate 32 oz of steaks fried in fat with potatoes and coffee on the side, even though he always denied being a large eater, despite his reputation for liking food. His physicians advised him to cut calories after seeing the movie. It was too quick, though. Within weeks, his weight plummeted from 300 pounds to 150 pounds. He was severely compromised by that crash diet. He suffered a heart attack in May of 1954. Time was of the essence. He toured with Laurel again later that year. Their Birds of a Feather concert tour began in the UK in October 1953. Half of the seats were occupied initially, but the numbers gradually increased. The Irish version had whistling boats and ringing church bells set to a catchy tune. It was a lovely and tragic day, according to Laurel, and he and Hardy both grieved. The decline in Hardy's health was evident to Laurel. It was in Plymouth on May 17, 1954, that they played their final concert together. They still had that delightful craziness, but Hardy was visibly struggling, one newspaper said. Despite this, they continued to dream. Their one and only appearance on American television was in December 1954 on This Is Your Life. It was meant to be the beginning of a new era. Laurel and Hardy's Fabulous Fables was a series that NBC had grand plans for. Everything was finalized: contracts, finances, and even a color photo spread in TV Guide. Stroke struck Stan Laurel in early 1955. Hardy had a massive heart attack and a stroke while he was in the hospital. He was crippled from September 1956 onward. This Is Music Hall, a BBC broadcast from 1955, was their final performance together. A smile eluded Hardy, who appeared fatigued. In 1956, he made his final appearance in front of the camera for a silent home movie shot at the residence of Stan Lovell's daughter. Following the stroke, he was unable to talk. He lay immobile and paralyzed. Lucille, Hardy's caring wife, would call Stan whenever he felt angry. The sight of Laurel was enough to put him at ease. They remained close no matter what. Everyone remembers a different Oliver Hardy. A picture that didn't feature the lanky, round man who would often tumble from ladders and spring back to his feet appeared in 1956. He appeared excessively skinny this time. His body was weak and gaunt, and the luster that had previously brought joy to millions of people was beginning to fade as he had dropped almost 100 pounds. Few could even identify him. A series of ailments, beginning with phlebitis, inflammation and blood clots in the legs, and progressing to thrombophlebitis, blood clots and inflammation, and finally strokes, had been slowly eroding his health for years. The same frail frame that had previously created comic history was now unable to support itself. Hardy needed a wheelchair for everything by 1956. He couldn't do anything on his own, not even clothe himself. The man who could previously break the stillness with his laughter was now unable to do even the most basic of activities. Something, though, endured during those trying final days: his charisma and good manners. His half-joke, half-truth statement, "I'd tip my hat to you, dear, if I could lift the damn thing," was classic Hardy, attempting to grin despite everything going wrong. The situation deteriorated by August 1957. 2 further strokes later, on August 7, 1957, Hardy went into a coma and eventually succumbed to cerebral thrombosis. That was 65 years ago. "Babe would understand," Stan Laurel replied, even though he was too weak to attend the burial. The entire world wept. Their 1975 single, Trail of the Lonesome Pine, peaked at number 2 on the UK charts, marking the second charting year following Hardy's passing. His remains were interred in North Hollywood's Masonic Garden at Valhalla Memorial Park. However, Hardy's tale was far from over. Along with Einstein and Monroe, the Beatles included his likeness on the 1967 cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In 1960, the Hollywood Walk of Fame bestowed a star upon him. His hometown in Georgia and England both have museums dedicated to him. The 2018 movie Stan and Ollie chronicled their last tour. Masonic symbols can be seen on his gravestone. Fans still drop by to express their gratitude.